Hey team, and welcome to another video in the Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we're going to talk about Mercury's transit throughout Gemini and just sort of explore it and see if there are any good magical electional opportunities for us to make any sort of Mercury talismans in. So of course, Gemini is one of Mercury's signs of domicile, and anytime a planet enters its sign of domicile, astrological magicians around the world perk up like a cat who's heard the clicking of his favorite mouse-shaped laser toy. So, is this Mercury in Gemini period going to be as exciting to us as laser pointers are to cats? Let's find out. One of the more unique and frankly annoying aspects of Mercury transits is that Mercury can only be so far away from the Sun. 27 degrees is Mercury's maximum elongation, so that's as far away as he can get before he has to turn retrograde and go back around. Think of Mercury as kind of tied to a leash around the Sun, basically. So Mercury can only be within 27 degrees of the Sun, and if he's within 7.5 degrees of the Sun, he's considered to be combust, which is a serious stability. And then if he's within 15 degrees of the Sun, he's considered to be within the beams of the Sun, which is another serious stability, a little bit less so than combustion, but still something you don't want in a magical election. So you can see how our electional opportunities concerning Mercury are very constrictive, right? Not only does it need to be, our kind of normal electional rules that need to be followed, moon application, planet's day, planet in dignity, planet in an angle, but we have to kind of dance around this close Sun issue. So even though on paper it looks like we have 27 degrees around the Sun to work with, we really only have about 12. Adding to that, Mercury transits in a sign tend to be really quick unless Mercury will station retrograde or direct at some point in that sign. He goes through them pretty quickly. Mercury's entire transit throughout Gemini lasts from May 11th to May 28th, so basically he'll be into Cancer by the time I get finished recording this video. But let's go ahead and just kind of take a look at what the Mercury in Gemini transit looks like from a magical astrological perspective. So here we have the chart of the Mercury Ingress, which takes place on May 11th. And kind of luckily, Mercury will ingress into Gemini far enough away from the Sun to no longer be considered combust. Now we're dealing with in the beams, which is still not something that you really want. So we kind of have to shoot forward in time to where we're no longer worried about Mercury being within the beams or combust. So we need to get Mercury a little bit more than 15 degrees away from the Sun. Here, we're at 9 degrees. So, we're most of the way there, but we just have a little bit more to go. Mercury will exit the beams of the Sun on May 17th, which then gives us 11 whole days to find a Mercury election that is suitable for a talismanic purpose, which is really kind of a lot to ask for. But let's see if we can do it. In North America, the only really debatable time that we have for a Mercury talisman would be May 18th at around 2 p.m. my time, and this chart is actually really good except for one kind of glaring feature. So as always when we're talking about planetary talismans, you want the planet in question, Mercury, that's the planet we're trying to make a talisman of, to be strong in a sign of its dignity. So here, Gemini, check, that makes sense. And then you want that planet to also be angular at the same time, as close as it can be to the ascendant degree or the midheaven degree. And here we have Mercury, very close to the conjunction of the midheaven, which is great. You want that all the time, anytime you can get it. And you also want these degrees to be unafflicted by any sort of malevolent planet or influence. So no squares or oppositions between Mars and Saturn and the more sensitive points in the electional chart. Not the ascendant, not the lord of the ascendant, not the planet in question, not the moon. You don't want that. And in this chart, we're free of that. We don't really have those influences in here, which is really good. We don't have that impact, that negative influence, which is great. We want that. But then the other thing that you want is that you want the moon's next aspect to be to that planet that we're working with. So we would want the moon's next aspect to be some sort of aspect, hopefully a friendly aspect. That's the ideal, but even like squares with the moon can be fine too. With Mercury, we want that to be the next aspect. And we don't have that in this chart, unfortunately. The moon is far enough past Mercury to now be applying the sextile with Venus, who is retrograde in Gemini. And you don't ever really want to have the moon applying to a retrograde planet in an electional chart of really any kind. It always signifies some sort of delay or like pushback or having to restart. That retrograde symbolism is then kind of baked into the chart, and you have to deal with it, and it often will be having to go back and do something again, giving up, changing your mind, that sort of restarting and rethinking. And you don't really want that in a talismanic influence. You want it to be very straightforward, you want it to be very purposeful, and you don't really want these kind of like false starts or stutter starts or to change your mind about whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You want it to to accomplish a goal, and you want to know what that goal is and kind of set with it. So the retrograde energy is never really welcome in talismanic elections, or really in any elections, honestly. Even more mundane elections, you don't really want them. So that was that chart set for my time, and I won't be able to do a Mercury talisman for that day because we don't have the moon applying to the Mercury, which we want, and we have, the moon applying to that retrograde Venus, which we don't want. So I would not be making a Mercury talisman at that time. But if we go to the East Coast, it kind of has an interesting problem that we can look at. So here's that same chart set for the East Coast. And you can see the moon's at 13 degrees and 53 minutes of Aries, while Mercury is within 13 degrees Gemini and 42 minutes of Aries. So the moon has separated the sextile from Mercury from about 11 minutes, so very, very close. And you can actually kind of go back in time and make it to where the moon is applying to Mercury, basically exactly. Like you could do a chart set for this at 1:13 p.m., and you can kind of have most everything that you want. It's still Mercury's hour, which is really great, and the moon is applying the sextile now to Mercury within, a minute of arc. So really, really close, really, really tight. But then we have kind of another problem enter the picture with this chart, and I wouldn't really recommend it for that, because now we have this Mars opposition to the ascendant that we have to worry about. This is getting closer, kind of the further back you go, obviously. And you really don't have a lot of wiggle room to make this distant. Like here, it's only distant 4 degrees, and my comfort zone, my personal comfort zone when it comes to aspects with the ascendant is 5 degrees. And there's not a way to make this chart happen to where the moon is still applying to Mercury, while Mars is far enough away, is more than 5 degrees away from the ascendant to get it from being, to keep it from being afflicted by it. Like here, 1:17 p.m., the moon is now officially separated from Mercury, and this is still within the 5 degree mark. So we're still having to deal with that. So I wouldn't really recommend this chart because that Mars opposition is really rough to deal with. And just kind of unfortunately, North America has to kind of miss out on this electional chart, has to miss out on this Mercury talisman opportunity. And this is really only one that there are. If you kind of shoot through the rest of the time period that Mercury's in Gemini, we don't have more opportunities, because then what's going to happen is, the moon will move into Taurus, and Taurus does not aspect Mercury in Gemini. They're reversed to one another, so there won't be any applications there, which is unfortunate. Then as the moon moves through Taurus, we won't have anything, obviously. And then the moon will move into Gemini, and will conjoin the sun, and we can't have, new moon talismans aren't very powerful. They're not very, they don't have a lot going for them. They're mostly inert. So we don't want anything with the moon while the moon is new. And then, you might think, the moon then applies a conjunction to Mercury after it passes this conjunction with Venus. And you're right, that does happen. And we can shoot forward a little bit and try to get this on the ascendant as much as we can. And there will actually be an opportunity to where you can have the moon and Mercury conjoined very closely right here on the ascendant in Gemini. And you might think, this is the thing that I've been waiting for. And it might be, but you probably can't see it in this. But at this point, it is the sun's day and Venus's hour. So we miss out on that Mercury timepiece, the Mercury day and the Mercury hour, or the Mercury day or the Mercury hour. And we don't have that here, so we're missing that crucial part of it. And then you have to deal with Mars being very angular. But, not afflicting, so he's not afflicting the moon or Mercury. They're far enough away to not be square to him, which is great. But he's still very angular. That might be kind of uncomfortable. And then after that, the moon will slip into Cancer. Cancer is averse to Mercury and Gemini. And then by the time the moon gets far enough into Leo to start, applying to Mercury or anything like that, Mercury dips out of Gemini and goes into Cancer before that can happen. So we've missed out, there are no opportunities after that in North America. Now, our friends in Western Europe, that's a different story. They actually will have an opportunity for a really great Mercury in Gemini talisman that we in North America and the United States and Canada will miss out on, unfortunately. So that same time period, basically, the May 18th, at closer to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Western Europe will have that more ideal setup that the same chart for North America was lacking. So, just like in the chart for North America, you have Mercury in its sign of domicile, Gemini, conjoined the midheaven, which is great, but the piece that we were missing was the moon application to Mercury, which this chart has. The moon is applying a sextile to Mercury within 2 degrees, and that's perfect. Like, this is the perfect Mercury in Gemini talisman. This is really like the ideal one. All of the boxes are checked. Mars is not square to Mercury. They're too far apart. Mars is not opposite the ascendant. It's not afflicting it like it was in the kind of the earlier versions of the East Coast chart for the United States, where you had to deal with the Mars opposition to the ascendant. It's super far away in this chart. So that isn't really something that they have to worry about in Western Europe. So they're just very lucky that they have this opportunity. So, if anybody in Western Europe is interested in making a Mercury talisman, for whatever reason, this would be a really great opportunity to do it, and I really suggest you take this opportunity to make it, because Mercury talismans are a little bit more complicated to find elections for than some of the other planets. So definitely take this opportunity. Don't let it slip through your fingers if it's something that you've been looking for, because it won't be until probably next year that we have another really great opportunity to do anything with it. So Australia has kind of an interesting story with their chart for this moment in time. A story that is somewhat similar to the East Coast of the United States' chart for this moment as well. So for Australia's version of this chart, you kind of have your same players involved. Mercury, of course, is going to be in Gemini. Mercury is going to be angular in the 10th house. The moon will be applying the sextile. It'll be Mercury's hour. So all that's good here. But how that chart ends up being structured is to where you basically have to have a later Leo ascendant rising to be useful. And so what this does is it brings the sun in, right? Our issue is, however, that now we have to deal with this square between Mars and the sun, who is the ruler of the first house. And you really don't have any wiggle room to get Virgo on the ascendant, because the hour of Mercury at this point ends at around 1:08 p.m. So this is, the last moment in the hour of Mercury, and you still have the sun as the ruler of the first house, and you're still dealing with this Mars square. So there's not a way you can get Virgo on the ascendant far enough to where you don't have to worry about the opposition then between Mars and the ascendant. So this Mercury talismanic opportunity is really only something that our friends in Western Europe will get to utilize, so the rest of us will just have to glare angrily at them while they walk around with their new Mercury talismans for this year. And that's really all we have going on for this Mercury and Gemini transit. It's very quick since there's no retrograde period. It's just kind of done and over with. And it's really just that one chart on May 18th that our friends in Western Europe will be able to utilize that we have access to. And that's just the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes. Hopefully Mercury stay through Virgo will be much more useful for us. And if it's not, then we just have to wait till next year to do something with Mercury in Gemini for another talismanic opportunity. But what would you use a Mercury talisman for? Say that you're interested in a Mercury talisman, just don't know what exactly it can be used for. Mercury talismans are actually very mercurial and adaptable, and they have kind of a lot of ground that they can cover. Obviously, they can be useful for speech and speech impediments, for oratory, for convincing people to do something, kind of like talking people into things. Can be really great for that. They're really good for study and research and reporting and journalism, engineering, mathematics, science. They're good for astrologers to be able to work with. Travel, business, commerce, safety in travel, working with technology, like, information technology. They can be useful for protecting oneself from theft. Mercury talismans can also be very good for exploring one's own thought processes and how you kind of connect dots and get to information, sort of like metacognition, thinking about thinking, why you think the way that you do, what you think about, those kinds of things. So basically just all of your typical mercurial things a Mercury talisman will help you to accomplish. Keep in mind, though, that Mercury can also help you to do better at or accomplish things that are associated with Mercury in your own natal chart. Like if Mercury rules, your 9th house, then Mercury will be very useful for travel for you because Mercury has authority over that in your own natal chart. If you're an individual with, Virgo or Gemini rising, the Mercury talismans can be used generally for health concerns for you because Mercury has that kind of natural authority of those topics for that individual. So just keep in mind that that's another way to work with Mercury and really any other planet as well, is to see what houses Mercury rules in your natal chart and what house Mercury is placed in your natal chart, to help get you an idea of what areas of life Mercury has either authority over by ruling those houses, or kind of a hand in by being literally placed within that house. Just another method to look at. So that's all I've got for you guys today. For those in Western Europe, congratulations on the really great Mercury talismanic opportunity on May 18th. Hopefully Mercury in Virgo will be nicer to those of us in North America and Australia than Mercury in Gemini was. But I hope everybody enjoys their Mercury in Gemini transit and has a lot of great positive Mercury experiences during it.